Think this is the right way.
You wait until now to tell me this?
This tale tells of a magical world that existed beneath our planet long ago. It was not an ordinary world. There was a connection between these worlds. The two were referred to as the upper and lower worlds, respectively. There once was a king who easily ruled over both worlds, but he was prone to daydreaming. The king was unhappy one day as a result of this, since it caused him a great deal of trouble and prevented him from ruling both of his worlds. This means that he imagined things that did not even exist in his own way because he used to get happiness from such things. They began to drift apart as a consequence of this. Now, a black shadow was born here as the lower world, the magical world, started to feel the king's pain and move inside. It matured and took on the name Shroud as it spread. Subsequently, he destroyed this world, transformed it into a dark realm, and permanently cut it off from our world. The story then shifts to the present day. Here, a boy named Peter, along with his parents and sister, were moving to a new home. Here, it becomes clear that Peter is anxious all the time because he fears what is around him. Another reason is that he used to get into trouble because he would often imagine the smallest things. Speaking of Peter's sister, she was entirely different from her brother. She was positive about everything, never lived in her imagination, and was always happy. These people are now residing here and moving around. Peter followed his sister, who was playing, to a general store the following day. There were many oddly colored, expensive-looking items strewn about this store, but despite everything, Peter really enjoys puzzle cubes, which are cubes on which a puzzle needs to be solved. Peter does not realize that the magic cube was actually a cube. Instead, he purchases it and takes it home. Peter's mother gives him a compass as a gift before he goes to bed, and it tells him about the routes. According to his mother, this belonged to his grandfather, who had promised to give it to Peter when he was a little older. With this compass in hand, he now goes to his room to begin working on the cube's puzzle. As this was going on, his sister arrived and asked Peter to give her the puzzle cube in exchange for some cash. Just as she reached to remove the coin and hand it to Peter, another coin dropped from the floor hole. Peter notices an animal's large eye as he reaches to pick up the coin from the hole, because the floor was made of wood. As a result, he becomes frightened and flees the room before he can comprehend anything at all. The floor and walls in his room also begin to fracture. In the next instant, everything in the room, including the bed that his sister was sitting on, started to fly into the air. When the bed and their belongings started to fall, Peter had already jumped onto it. In actuality, a path to solving Peter's riddle had become available, and as a result, they descended into the same universe as before. Many strange creatures appeared as the bed collapsed in front of them, dragged the bed, and began removing them from the area. In actuality, they were taking all of these actions to save their lives since the monster Shroud, who knew they had come, was ready to attack at any moment. They are now transported to a different location by all of these creatures, and they cross the bridge to get there. They then destroy this bridge to prevent the monster from pursuing them. They are now brought to a cave by all the creatures. The kids were taking a close look at everything. They were taken aback by what was happening to us as well. At that point, the creatures had appeared, and it became enraged upon seeing them because, as humans, they pose no less of a threat. When the old creature hears this, he appears in front of everyone, telling them not to get upset and explaining that it's not a coincidence that Peter and his sister have arrived here. Years ago, the patient was given a prophecy that these two children would arrive, along with Peter, who will rule as king here. He'll restore the previous state of this world and save us all from Shroud. Due to Peter's past involvement in the king's murder, the old creature led them into the cave where they saw a drawing of Peter and his sister along with the prediction written on the wall. Furthermore, numerous other images were taken there that depict all of this, as well as the old creature's history. How your elders, the sorrow monster Shroud, were born here because of the black shadow, and this world was split apart because of the king who once ruled over both worlds. As a result, the only clock in this location that told the time broke and the time stopped. Peter is going to have to restart this clock. Based on the prediction, Peter will need to locate and solve a few more enchanted puzzle cubes in order to accomplish this. Following that, he will receive a key, which will allow him to operate the clock. As a result, Peter and his sister now realize that they must first solve these puzzles if they wish to leave this world. The elderly creature gives Peter a book to find the next puzzle cube, but the entire book was empty. The elderly creature informs you that this is a magical book that can only be read by this intelligent creature, who happens to be a mechanic. As a result, you must go see the mechanic creature. Their head consented to take him to him after hearing this. Pling, the son of the old creature, was also traveling with him when they got into a fight. Shroud arrived and attacked them after hearing the argument between Pling and the head. They fled as a result, but not before Peter, his sister, and Pling suffered numerous falls and emerged from the cave. When they realize they are lost, Pling hands Peter the compass and says, "This shows the way, let's use it." After using it, they eventually come across the mechanic who was fixing a whole statue in addition to many other wheeled machines at the moment. When they ask him for assistance, the mechanic responds, "I'm busy right now. Go and come back sometime," but Pling responds, "My dad sent me." After learning this, the mechanic comes out right away and offers to assist him. He takes Peter's puzzle and places it on the book. At that time, the book had lines written on it, along with maps, pictures, and a note asking where the next puzzle would be. Additionally, when you solve a puzzle, the mechanical creature reveals how the way was made. This book will tell you where the next puzzle is located. It had to have been written all the way. After telling Peter everything, he hands him a small gadget, a bulb device, and instructs him to use his imagination to run this, but not before letting go of any fear he may have in seeing it through to the end. Additionally, you must carefully read this book. You will therefore comprehend everything. At his command, Peter now closes his eyes, lets go of his fear, and listens. He opened the book that contained the puzzle and began to read. Now that Peter's eyes were closed, he can read the riddle in his head thanks to Pling, and when he does, he discovers that in order to get the next puzzle, he must go to the ground of a ruined building and stand where there is a large eye in the sky. With Pling's assistance, they now arrived at the ruined building and stood where a large clock picture was created. Based on the clock, there were 12 numbers. However, since number 13 is clearly not included in the clock, they must determine the next number. They search everywhere, but are unable to find that number. But Peter persists in searching the ruins for it. Eventually, he finds 13 numbers in a large picture, beneath which numerous images of rats have been created, along with a small button. Peter pressed it, and a wall that was actually a hidden locker began to open, in which Peter was pleased to receive the next cube puzzle. But a massive dragon appears here as a result of the cube emerging. Peter looked at it and became alarmed. With great courage, he hides behind a pillar, but then recalls something about the mechanic creature. "You are a king, and a king should be brave. He should be able to control his fear, recognize his powers, and should use them." Peter runs up to the dragon and says, "Look, I have a puzzle cube here and I am the king here." As soon as the dragon hears this, it bows its head, apologizes, and says, "Please forgive me. I had no idea. I am also capable of taking on any form." After hearing this, Peter says, "It's okay, let's move on to the next puzzle cube location, which is a desert-built temple." The dragon now modifies his body slightly, turning the upper portion of it into iron. Since it had created a seat for these 3 people, it now approaches the temple where Peter, his sister, and Pling were taken. There were numerous statues of the creatures there, all of which were the creatures of soldiers. Even though everyone had previously been alive and well due to the attack by the Shroud, they had all turned into stones. As they enter the temple, they discover a 2-headed tortoise, actually, 2 that have been joined together, and they begin to converse with Peter, the king, but he becomes irate with them. "For that reason, why do you talk so much? I need to find the puzzle, so don't waste my time." Now, Peter's sister was trying to stop him from acting in this way because she didn't like it, but they got into a fight over it. His sister then becomes enraged and leaves the room. Following that, Peter began examining the temple, and numerous photographs were taken. One wall had 4 or 5 stones with some pictures etched on them. Peter touches the stones to turn them in accordance with the codes, which now contained the puzzle. He now solved this puzzle and turned all the stones in this manner. This also happened to be a secret method for him to obtain the next puzzle cube, so as this was happening, the wall began to open. Prior to this, he had this cube in the book. He heard his sister scream outside and went to find the next puzzle cube. He went outside to check on things, and discovered that his sister and the dragon had been captured by the army of Shroud, which was made up entirely of robot machines. Peter flatly rejects the army commander's request to quietly turn over the puzzle cube, saying, "My work is incomplete, I couldn't find all the puzzles." The leader became enraged upon learning of this rejection. He began hitting Peter and attacking them as a result, all the while calling his people. When the dragon sees this, it also grows enraged. Using its strength, it expands to a larger size and begins to murder the soldiers. It was so large that everyone in front of it appeared to be children, and it continued to crush them like ants. Here, there was a heated argument. Then, using the tool the mechanic gave him, Peter applies his cunning to quickly defeat this entire army. However, because he was a Shroud soldier, the soldier attacked Peter's sister during this battle. That is why his sister began turning stone. There was only one thing left to do to save his sister, and that was to defeat Shroud. Since they were running out of time, they decided to find the next puzzle cube, which would be their last. Since it was hidden on top of a mountain, they knew they had to find it there. The tortoise said, "I think I have come here before, but I don't remember when they arrived." His sister became increasingly stoned during this time, which caused her to become ill. When Peter realized this, he began to worry about her and left his sister in charge of the dragon and the tortoise. He and Pling search for the puzzle cube. He enters the room and solves the puzzle, but to his surprise, when he gets to the puzzle place, it's not there, because someone has already taken the puzzle cube. When Peter realized this, he felt guilty, disappointed, and decided to come out. Now that his sister had fully turned stone, he was upset to see this and furious, which is why he threw the magic book the old creature had given him down. Since he was no longer believing any of this, he believes that I won't be able to accomplish anything correctly and that the tortoise now knows when it arrived. He gives Peter the last cube, and although Peter was happy that all the puzzle cubes had now arrived, he becomes unhappy because they no longer have a book because he had thrown it down. It says that Peter was there when I arrived and that I took the last cube from there so that Shroud would not take it. He begins to cry over how foolish he was, but the flying dragon comforts him and descends to look for the book. It was discovered, so it returns with it. Peter keeps the book where he learned that he would have needed the key in order to run the clock. They must go to a tower, a clock tower, in order to obtain that key. Thus, despite his distaste, Peter leaves his sister's idol at the clock tower and goes there with the dragon. As he enters, he notices numerous large magic gloves. These were the areas that were guarding the tower and prevented anybody from moving forward save the king. The gloves now halt Peter and his friends as they begin to advance. The dragon appears on it and says, "Do not stop us, let us go. Peter is the next king." The gloves say, "All right, this is the situation, let's settle on that. But if Peter is to be king, he must demonstrate his abilities." After learning this, Peter begins to consider his options because it appears he lacks special abilities. However, he was skilled in a game involving hands and fingers, so he challenges the gloves to play. Peter wins, and this time the gloves become irate, asking why we lost. He began attacking Peter at that point. Upon realizing this, he thought of the same bulb device the mechanic had given him, and he gave it instructions to attack, break, and destroy every one of them. In doing so, the bulb device attacks the gloves, shattering them into numerous pieces, destroying everything in the process. After that, with the help of the puzzles, Peter finds the key to the clock, but in the process, Pling also turns into a stone, and Peter realizes that Shroud is actually the dragon that has been assisting him in finding the key for so long. Shroud was always with him, but now that his true nature has surfaced, he no longer appears as the dragon and instead takes on the form of his true Shroud monster. With its assistance, it was able to disperse the body with such strength that it attacked Peter and exposed his most shocking secret. In actuality, Peter's sister was just a creation of his imagination. In actuality, he was unable to handle the grief and could not accept his sister's passing at some point prior to her passing. He began to imagine her, and as a result, he began to see her everywhere. He said this, Shroud began to attack him. Peter was actually living in shame that I did nothing to save his sister's life after her death. I am useless. And Shroud was trying to weaken him by taking advantage of his shame and fear. But he now realizes that I have come to this world and that my sister is here, not just in my imagination, and that I can use magic to bring her back to life so she can continue to live here after she passes away. He was now content that he had another opportunity to bring his sister back to life. In order to save his sister and others, he now erases all of his fears. For this reason, he also gives the order to use his bulb device and attacks Shroud. As a result of Shroud's tangled body, the light finally broke through and the world was no longer in complete darkness. Shroud died in this manner. Peter now restarts the clock, and as time passes, everything returns to normal in this world. Things started to function and the light started to shine from this location. Peter's sister and the stone creatures also returned to their normal state. His sister is now leaving this world. It pleased Peter to see her. Peter is now respectfully crowned because he helped to fix everything. But he removes the crown and gives it to his sister, claiming that she has a right to it since she is a part of this world. Saying goodbye to everyone, he returned to his world and his broken room returned to normalcy. He tells his father all of this after waking up from sleep, explaining that what we saw at the beginning was just a product of his imagination. In his mind, his sister was still alive, and he had always wanted to see her. She was someone he could only meet in his dreams now. Since Peter was of their generation, we also know that the king at first imagined the worlds below and above. As a result of his worries, the world stopped when the clock stopped, which was fixed by their generation's child. Now, we see the world below in Peter's imagination, where his sister has assumed the role of queen.